I did some boots on the ground exploration of the Nebraska Capitol building in Lincoln, Nebraska. And as I explored that building, I realized it is not what we've been told that it is, and that it's in fact actually an ancient temple built around 500 BC approximately. And I documented some proof of this that I want to share with you guys. So on the exterior of the Nebraska Capitol, you've got these ancient men engraved in stone. Interestingly is that underneath them is actually ancient Egyptian language. This other guy right here with even more obvious ancient Egyptian writing underneath it. And we're gonna see some more of this writing and these symbols when we look at the interior of the Nebraska Capitol building. And if what I'm about to show you is real, then it means that there were ancient Egyptian, Israelite, and Nephite civilizations that used to live in these lands, from which we have leftover architecture, which also means that the history we've been told about these lands is a false history. And by the end of this video, I'll even actually show you that they admit that this is indeed an ancient temple. Here's a map of the United States. Here's the state of Nebraska. Down here, you've got the city of Lincoln, where the state capitol is located. So first we're going to start by analyzing the dome and the person on top of the dome, on top of the huge tower that shoots out of the middle of this building. Then we'll look at a little bit more of the exterior, and then we're going to go inside the building and look at the interior of it, and just look at all the different proof that there is that this is indeed an ancient leftover temple. First, let's talk about this guy up here. They call him the Sower, S-O-W-E-R, and he's made out of pure copper, and he stands on top of wheat and corn. And in his left hand, he's got a bag of seeds, and in his right hand, he's tossing those seeds into the earth. And by the way, this tower right here that shoots up out of the middle of this huge stone base is about 400 feet tall, they say. And I'm going to be using this site a couple times throughout this video. It's nebraskavirtualcapital.org. It's fun to poke around and see some close-up shots of all the different ancient stuff that is on this building. So what we can learn about the sower through this site is it says the sower stands on a pedestal of wheat and corn, and it says that he's a symbol of sowing the seeds of noble living, noble meaning striving to be good and worthy. So they're saying that this sower statue on top of the dome is about sowing good ideas. We're gonna do a much better job of explaining who the sower actually is. And to do that, we've got to read the parable of the sower from the New Testament. And for a very full, in-depth breakdown of everything that I'm about to go through, because I'm gonna have to skip over some stuff just for sake of time, just gonna give you the bullet points here. But for a full, in-depth breakdown on my channel called We Zombie Rod of Iron, there's a playlist called The Stone Woman, which is 12 videos long. These are some of the videos right here. And it takes you very, very, very much in depth about everything I'm about to talk about. So the parable of the sower goes like this. In the New Testament, book of Matthew, chapter 13, verse 24, it says, "The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field." And another word for sowing is also husbandry. Basically, we're just talking about farming, planting seeds and growing crops. And there's different words for that. Farming's one, sowing is one that the scriptures use a lot, and then the scriptures also use the word husbandry a lot. So if you're practicing husbandry, you're a husbandman. If you're practicing sowing, you're a sower. If you're practicing farming, you're a farmer. These are what all these words mean right here. So the parable is that there's a man in a field sowing seed, and that field is likened unto the kingdom of heaven. And then it says that when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, there appeared the tares also. And by the way, they're planting wheat. And as they plant this wheat, there's also some tares that start to grow up along with it. And tares is a weed that looks like wheat, especially in its early stages. And so if you start to see some tares grow it up, and you go out there to grab them all and pull them all up, then you're gonna accidentally pull up a bunch of wheat that you don't really want to pull up just because they look so similar. So what the parable continues to say is one of the servants asks the master, "Shall we go and gather up the tares? There's some tares there. Should we go get them?" And the master says, "No, because if you gather up the tares, you'll root up also the wheat with them." So he says, "Let them both grow together until the harvest, because then at harvest time, once they've both grown up and matured, it's much easier to distinguish between the two. So you can easily go grab the tares and get rid of them, and not have pulled up any of the wheat, so you've protected all your crops. Let them grow together until the harvest. Then gather ye first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, and then gather the wheat into my barn. And I have right here the fasces symbols up here because that's what this verse is talking about. The fasces is the symbol of the tares being bound in bundles and cast into the fire. That's what the fasces is. It's literally a bundle of sticks, and the axe through it I'll talk about in just a second, but it's a tightly bound bundle of sticks or bundle of tares. And we learn in Matthew 13:37 that he that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. So it's talking about God sowing seed in the earth. And it says that the good seed is the children of the kingdom, the children of God, but the tares are the children of the wicked one, and that the enemy that sowed them is the devil. And so what the parable is saying right here is that God, the ultimate sower, sowed good seed in the earth, the righteous people, the wheat, his children, and then the devil came and sowed tares or wicked people among the righteous, among the wheat. In Matthew 13:40, the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. And then Luke 3:9 gives us more information about the axe that we see inside of this symbol. And we'll see this symbol on the Nebraska Capitol building in just a second. But it says that the axe is laid at the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, which bringeth forth not good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. So the bundle of sticks, the fasces with the axe in it, is all a symbol of God bundling up the wicked, the children of the devil, and casting them into the fire, destroying them at the harvest time. And then the wheat is the symbol of God's righteous people, which he's going to gather into his barn, into his kingdom. So that's what this ancient sower statue is depicting on top of this ancient temple, this Nebraska Capitol building, is that story. They say it's sowing noble ideas, but what it's truly saying, what it actually is the parable of the sower. It's God casting seed into the earth, the wicked being bound up in bundles and cast into the fire, and the righteous the wheat get carried into God's barn, God's kingdom. And that's also why he's standing on top of ancient Egyptian eagles right here, because this eagle is also a symbol of an ancient covenant that God made with mankind. And part of this ancient covenant that God made with mankind is that man and his people are supposed to be sowers and husbandmen, and part of that is he promised a certain location of land to his people, and that certain location of land also includes corn. Hang with me through this, I'm going to connect all the dots. So if we go back to Adam, Adam's the first man. That's where the covenant started. God made this first man, Adam, and told Adam and taught Adam how to do things. And he told Adam to multiply and replenish the earth, to be a husbandman, to be a farmer, to be a sower. So he was the first covenant husbandman and also a mason, a stonemason, a builder. Now, I'll be honest here, it doesn't specifically say that Adam built stone architecture in the Bible. But as you read forward and you see how the covenant continues and what all the other people after Adam do, it's very easy to look back and go, yeah, Adam must have been doing the same things as well. And we're shown that all these people from the ancient times were poor dirt rag people, and that's not true at all. And I break this down very thoroughly in my Stone Woman presentation, but they were advanced, prosperous, rich masons building tremendous stone architecture. Pyramids, temples, huge walls, huge towers, all that sort of stuff, adorned with gold and statues and silver, and they had awesome transportation and all that sort of stuff. And the Bible does say these things, but we don't actually read it that way, mainly just because we're not reading the scriptures. And then when we do, oftentimes it's overridden with all these other stories we've been told and shown about how the scriptures were and how those civilizations were, which is actually just deceptive. But if you read the text for what it's actually saying, it's saying these were advanced sowers and husbandmen, and they were also masons that were extremely skilled at advanced stone architecture. And then we get the story of Noah. He's the next covenant husbandman and mason, and we see right here that Noah builded an altar unto the Lord. And we, again, like I just explained, we're told and taught and shown that altars are just like these little dinky stone benches in dirt, and that's not true at all, especially when it lays this out in the Old Testament. But these were advanced masonry rich civilizations who were extremely good at architecture. And so when Noah built an altar, he's building an amazing piece of architecture. And then also it says in Genesis 9:9, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. Speaking to Noah, hinting also at the fact that this covenant was also already previously established with Adam. And then right after God established this covenant with Noah, it says Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. He's a sower, he's a husbandman now. That's part of this ancient covenant. And Adam and Noah, they got the whole earth. Adam was the first man, he got the whole earth. Noah was and the people with him were the survivors of the flood. They got the whole earth. And then we get to a man named Abraham, who's the next man that God made this covenant with. And the difference here is that he wasn't given the whole earth. He was given a specific location of land on the earth. Genesis 12:7 says, "The Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord." So he's given this specific location of land, which is called the Promised Land, which is often referred to as the Promised Land. And then right after that, he builds an altar. We see that Abraham is a mason. I didn't include this verse, but it said that he was very rich. Genesis 17:7 says, "I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee." So we see here now that that covenant that God established with Adam and Noah, it's now being established with Abraham and all of his seed, all of his children, all of his posterity. One of his children is Isaac, and the covenant is also given to Isaac. It says, "I will be with thee and will bless thee, and your seed. I will give all these countries to you, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father." And what did Isaac do? He sowed in the land. So every time this covenant is established, they're building masonry and they're sowing, they're being husbandmen. And then God also made that same covenant with Jacob, another child of Abraham, and Jacob's name got changed to Israel. So Israel is just a name of the man named Jacob. It's just a name change. Nowadays, we're told that it's this location in the Middle East, and that's just the whole hoax that's been set up. I'm not going to get into that right now. For a full breakdown of that, see my Stone Woman presentation. But Israel's not a country in the Middle East. Israel is a man named Jacob. And God continued his covenant that he made with Abraham through Jacob, or Israel. Genesis 28:4 right here, this is speaking to Jacob. It says, "I'll give thee the blessing of Abraham, that thou mayest inherit the land which God gave unto Abraham." And then in Genesis 28:22, he marked the God's house location on earth with a pillar made out of stone, practicing masonry. And then this covenant continues through Joseph, often called Joseph of Egypt. And right here it says, Genesis 48:21, "Israel, Jacob, said unto Joseph, I'm about to die, but God shall be with you and bring you again unto the land of your fathers," going back to that promised land location. And then next we get the story of Moses, because the children of Jacob, the children of Israel, known as the Israelites, were held captive in Egypt. And God decided to escape them out of Egypt and take them back to the promised land, and Moses being the man that took the lead of doing that. And so we also see right here in Exodus 17:15, Moses built an altar. Once again, we see him practicing masonry. And then Exodus 19:4, it tells us that the eagle is the symbol of God escaping his people out of Egypt and bringing them to the promised land. It says right here, "You've seen what I did unto the Egyptians, how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself." So that's why we see on top of this huge ancient tower right here, the sower, telling us about the parable of the sower, the righteous and the wicked, and God's covenant with his righteous people. But then the eagle telling us even more specifically about this ancient covenant with his people, and how the eagle is the symbol of bringing his people to the promised land. And that promised land is actually the land now called United States of America, not the whole Middle East thing. Full breakdown of that in my Stone Woman presentation. But that's why the eagle is still the symbol of these lands nowadays, is because this is the land that was promised to Abraham and Jacob and Joseph. But Moses didn't make it all the way to the promised land, and so he passed the leadership position, I guess you could say, to Joshua, another child of Abraham. In Deuteronomy 31:23, it says that Joshua was the one to bring the children of Israel into the land which was sworn unto them. And then it also continues in Joshua 5:11 that when they got there, they did eat the old corn of the land. There's a million different types of fruits and vegetables and grains, but here we are talking about corn as the thing they ate when they got to the promised land. And Nebraska is right smack dab middle of the promised land, and corn is very much a symbol of that location. And then the last symbol that I'm going to tie into this ancient covenant right here is this robed woman right here sitting on a throne. She's who I call the stone woman. She's who I named the stone woman playlist presentation after, because of who she is and what she represents, what she is the symbol of. And you can see this beautiful marble tile work on the floor of the Nebraska Capitol right here. So who is this stone woman? She is symbolically God's wife. Not literally his wife, but symbolically his wife. And this is why Isaiah 54:5, thy maker is thine husband, speaking about the children of Israel, the children of Jacob, the children of Abraham, the children of Joseph of Egypt. He's saying the maker, God, is your husband. Jeremiah 3:14, speaking to the Israelites, the children of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, he's saying, I am married unto you. Malachi 2:14, he calls them the wife of the covenant, because he's the husband, they're the wife. Now this one's going to seem like it's coming from left field a little bit, but I'm going to make this make sense. And I know a lot of people have issue with the Book of Mormon, but it doesn't talk about all the weird stuff that you hear about the Mormons and the Mormon church. So here's the introduction of the Book of Mormon, and it says it's a record of God's dealings with the ancient inhabitants of the Americas. The Native Americans and where they come from and their ancestors, that's what the Book of Mormon is about. And their dealings with God, their dealings with Jesus Christ. And it says specifically that the record gives an account of two great civilizations. One came from Jerusalem in 600 BC, and afterwards separated into two nations known as the Nephites and the Lamanites. So it's about a family that escaped Jerusalem in 600 BC before King Nebuchadnezzar came and conquered Jerusalem. They escaped and they came to the land that is now the land called United States of America, which is the land promised to Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. Now, the Jerusalem location was promised to the tribe of Judah. This is the Abraham, Jacob, tribe of Joseph location that they escaped to and settled, which is this location right here, the Mississippi River Valley. So this big river running down from north to south, that's the Mississippi River, and then all of its tributaries, all the branches of water off of it, is what makes up the Mississippi River Valley, not to be confused with the state of Mississippi. There's a state down here, which the Mississippi River does run down to that state, but the river's valley is all of the waterways that branch off of it, which is basically all of the United States minus the western United States, minus the Rocky Mountains and to the west. So the Book of Mormon is about the ancient civilizations that lived in these lands right here. And Lincoln, Nebraska is right in here, which is very much exactly in that area, which is why I'm bringing the Book of Mormon into this. Because the Book of Mormon tells us who the Native Americans actually are, the Native American Indians that we think of, where they actually come from, who they actually are. And who they actually are is the tribe of Joseph that escaped out of Jerusalem in 600 BC. And when they got to these lands, they separated into two different nations known as the Nephites and the Lamanites. And we're going to see the Nephites and the Lamanites depicted alongside the ancient Israelites on this Nebraska Capitol building, this ancient temple that's left over from them. The Nephites and the Lamanites are the people most closest to us in time that were in these lands that built this stuff. But prior to them, it was Abraham and Noah and even Adam in these lands. And on my We Zombie Rod of Iron channel, in my Stone Woman playlist, if you go to this video right here, video 4 of 12, Jacob's pillar still stands in its original location, I show you that the pillar that Jacob built to mark the God's house location still stands in its original location, which is actually in Missouri. So I understand this can seem very far-fetched, but there's actually very real evidence of all this stuff, like Jacob's pillar still standing in its original location, marking the correct promised location that was promised to Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. And then you've got this Book of Mormon, which is talking about a continuation of that covenant, the seed of Joseph going back to that location, and that's the location they go to, is the land we now call the United States of America. And this was prophesied in the Old Testament, that there would be a remnant escaping out of Jerusalem. 2 Kings 19:30, a remnant that has escaped out of the house of Judah shall yet again take root downward and bear fruit upward. Take root downward and bear fruit upward. That's husbandry terminology. That's sowing terminology. That's going back to that covenant location and sowing and prospering in those lands. 2 Kings 19:31, out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they that escape out of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Isaiah 65:9, I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob and out of Judah. And the Book of Mormon is talking about a seed of Jacob, a seed of Joseph, escaping out of the Jerusalem location, which is the Judah location. exactly what these scriptures are talking about. And the second verse of the Book of Mormon says, I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians. So the civilizations that the Book of Mormon talks about were very much Jewish and Egyptian people. And that's why we see this ancient Egyptian language on this Nebraska Capitol building right here, is because that's what the civilizations that built this stuff, that was their language. And the Book of Mormon was originally written in records that were written in ancient Egyptian and then were translated into English. And in the very first bit of the Book of Mormon, in the first chapters, it says that this family that escaped out of Jerusalem was a descendant of Joseph, who was a son of Jacob. They were a continuation of this covenant. A land which the Lord God hath covenanted with me should be a land for the inheritance of my seed. Yea, the Lord hath covenanted this land unto me and to my children forever. And it also says that the Lord was with them, and they did sow seed. They tilled the ground with all manner of seeds, with seeds of corn and of wheat and of barley, with neis and sheum, and with seeds of all manner of fruits. So they were definitely sowers. And they were also definitely masons. It said they became exceedingly rich in gold and in silver and in precious things, in fine workmanship of wood, in buildings, in machinery, and also in iron and copper and brass and steel, making all manner of tools of every kind. And all these materials are the exact same materials we see on this stone architecture that's very much Egyptian Jewish style architecture, like the Nebraska Capitol building. And so that's why we see on top of this huge tower, the sower made out of copper, standing on top of wheat and corn, alongside this ancient Egyptian eagle, because it's telling us that this is the ancient covenant of this land and of the people that used to be in this land. The Israelites, and also the continuation of that covenant, which was the Nephites and the Lamanites, the ancestors of the Native Americans that the Book of Mormon talks about, and they were Egyptian Jewish style people. And if we look at these two people again right here, which I think are Adam and Eve, where I showed you this little lamb ready for sacrifice, you'll also notice right next to them is this bundle of tares, or this fasces. The tares bound tightly, ready to be cast in the fire with the axe through it. Here's another look at it, and sitting in between those two is the scales of justice and mercy, or the scales of equity and justice, which is what God does. He's the one who can balance things perfectly, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad. And he can weigh it all and measure it and judge it correctly. And then in the middle of that is the fasces with the axe inside of it. And then on the exterior is the fasces with the axe in it, which is the symbol of God bundling up the tares, the wicked ones, the children of the devil, and casting them into the fire. And if you come to this Nebraska virtual Capitol tour right here, it allows you to click on all the different photos right here, and it gives you a little description about what each of these are. So like this one right here, where I said this is Adam and Eve, there's animal sacrifice, Adam's clutching the sword of truth, Eve has her right arm held to the square. You've got ancient animal sacrifice right here. You've got the fasces with the axe, which is the bundle of tares, the wicked being cast in the fire. But what do they say about it? They say these are engaged sculptures of power and mercy. The sculpture figures above the north door were designed to look like part of the architecture of the Capitol. So I don't know, I just proposed the question. Which one seemed to make more sense? My description of these things and pulling them from the scriptures, or this, oh yeah, power and mercy? And then like this one, for example, I just broke this one down for you. You got the bullock depicting animal sacrifice. You've got the scales of justice and mercy. God's the one who judges perfectly, and that's hanging off of the fasces, which is the wicked being bound up and cast into the fire, the axe that cuts down the trees that don't produce good fruit. And here's what they say about it. They say this is a relief sculpture of the Nebraska State seal, but it was never adopted. So they just engraved this state seal into stone right here that perfectly matches ancient scripture stories from the Bible. But no, we never adopted this seal, but it's engraved in stone all over this Capitol building. Or you guys just making up new stories for ancient temples. And then they also have these squares all around the building with ancient stone people and ancient stone artwork inside of them. Like right here, we see a woman sitting on a throne with a ancient temple, what we think of as a Capitol building nowadays, but are our Capitol buildings just ancient temples that we're being told new stories about? And her throne right here is actually made out of an eagle. You can see its feet right here, its wings shoot back this way. Right here is its head, and she is the wife of the covenant. And then you also have this one right here, this stone depiction where it's clearly Moses right here with the 10 commandments. They're all dressed in really nice robes. And then right here, you've got an altar and animal sacrifice being depicted on top of this altar right here. This is just government buildings in 100 years ago. They're putting animal sacrifice and Moses on these buildings. And what they say about this Moses depiction is Moses was a Hebrew prophet who lived over 1,200 years ago, before the Common Era. That's about 3,200 years ago. Whew! And I think they're kind of hinting at that's how old this stuff actually is. Or, you know, maybe not quite that old, but it's definitely old. 500 BC is what I think this building comes from, because the Nephites escaped Jerusalem. The seed of Joseph escaped Jerusalem around 600 BC, and then they came here to these lands and got settled and started to be industrious and started to build and everything like that. So 100 years later, let's say, sometime in that time period, they're probably building this stuff. That puts it around 500 BC. Moses is known as a Hebrew prophet and lawgiver who brought the law from Sinai, which, yeah, Moses did bring down commandments from Sinai to the Israelites, but they're just saying this, all this perfect match for Old Testament architecture is they're just making it match. Oh yeah, this is just all to talk about modern day law, modern day government, when it's clearly not that at all. Then you also have this one right here, which is a very obvious scene from the Old Testament. This is King Solomon right here sitting on his throne. And then you got a guy holding up a baby, and then there's this woman kneeling and pleading, and then another woman behind him with her head kind of looking down. And what this is the story of when King Solomon became king. He asked God for wisdom to be able to judge the people wisely and correctly, because he's like, how could I ever judge such great a people? So he asked God to bless him with wisdom, and God did that. And then the story of how everyone came to know that God really had blessed him with all that wisdom is because there were two women who were fighting over a baby and who the baby belonged to. And so King Solomon goes, you know what we're going to do is we're going to split the baby in half, and each of you can have half of the baby. And the reason he did that is because he knew that the real mother would never be okay with that and would plead that the baby doesn't get killed, while the other mother would just kind of be confused by the whole thing. And so what happened is exactly that. He says, I'm going to split the baby in half, and each of you can have half of the baby. And then one of the mothers piped up and go, no, please don't kill the baby. You can just let the other woman have the baby. And that's how they knew that that was the actual mother, because she wasn't okay with the baby being killed. And that's what proved to all of the people that King Solomon had God's wisdom, that God had blessed him with that great of wisdom. And that's the story that's being depicted right here on the Nebraska Capitol building, because we just wanted to use Moses and King Solomon and the eagle and the sower and the stone woman, this ancient covenant story. This is the story we wanted to use to talk about modern law in Nebraska in 1920. And look how old this building looks. Like, this isn't 100 years old. This is 3,000 years old, 2,500 years old, 2,000 years old. That makes a lot more sense for this building. And then there's so many more of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you've got this one right here, so just ancient people depicted. This one right here, more ancient people depicted, and you got, you know, that ancient Egyptian symbol right there. You've got another one right here where it shows the stone woman right here, armored up, holding a robe and a shield, armor of God. And who do they say she is? Greek mythology, Athena. So it's either a symbol of Nebraska, a symbol of the state, or it's some Greek goddess. But really what it is she's the wife of the covenant. She's the symbol of the ancient covenant. She's the wife, the bride, the church of the Lamb, Jesus Christ. Here's a look at one of the hallways when you enter in on the main floor. I'm sure there's floors below this. Well, I know there is actually, but I didn't go to any of those. But this is the floor that you enter in on, and it's amazing. The stonework and the archwork is just impeccable. It's super, super quiet inside because of how thick all the stone is, and just has a really, really cool feeling to it. And you can see the amount of stone here is tremendous. Like, you can tell from the outside it's a big, big stone building, but then you go on the inside and it's like, dude, every little piece of this is just straight, super thick stone. It's amazing how heavy this stone is and how much of it there is everywhere. And then on the ceiling, like the curved arched ceilings, in a couple spots you find Moses again. So here's Moses wearing a robe. He's got his right arm to the square and his left hand on the firmament. And here's another depiction of him wearing a robe and writing the commandments onto the tablets. Then right here you have this amazing stonework on the floor right here, all types of different marble. And then the stone woman, the very dead center of it, sitting on a throne. And she's depicted over here holding a bundle of wheat. And here's a bunch of really nice fruit. And then right over here, milk or honey pouring out of a jug. All ancient Old Testament symbolism. The wheat, the righteous, being gathered up. The land of milk and honey is how the promised land is described. And then she's the stone woman, the wife, the bride, sitting on the throne. And she's got good fruit right here. And then spinning off of her is all the different like wildlife creation. Like over here you've got like mammoths and elephants. And then right here you've got some sea creatures. Over here you've got what we would think of as dinosaur type creatures. And then over here you've got your flying creature, your fowls of the air. So this is all depicting the creation story in Genesis right here. And man was made and given dominion over all the fish of the sea, all the fowls of the air. And then over here you can see that he's holding a hammer, practicing masonry. And then there's also this on one of the ceilings where you see just all these ancient people wearing robes. And she's also the main symbol of it inside of here again. Like there she is right there. And here she is right here upside down, but there she is again. And what they say about all these ancient people wearing robes is they just chose a Gothic style of dress to portray citizens because they decided not to use modern clothing so that figures would appear timeless and never go out of style. Or is this just ancient depictions all over this building because it's an ancient building? Here's a closer look at that image. You can see here's the stone woman holding a bundle of wheat. We know the wheat are the righteous. God gathers them up into his barn, and she's the symbol of the wife of the covenant. And they just say that she is Ceres, the Roman goddess representing agriculture. And of course, they can do all this masterful stone artwork on the inside of the building, but when they constructed the building in 1920, they just had dirt roads. They didn't have paved roads. They didn't have highways and stuff like that yet. They did say that they had a train that ran through Nebraska at that time that helped them move the materials around. But it's like, dude, they were this masterful at stonework, and all the pictures were shown of like the construction of this stuff is just dirt roads. Like that's completely ridiculous. The first thing we do, and our stuff that we build with nowadays is not even close to this type of weight, but the first thing we do just to haul in our little sticks is we pave a road, because you need a nice road to haul in all your materials. And so to say that they hauled all this in and they were this masterful with this, like these are all just little tiny marble tiles right here. They're that masterful at leveling and not just paving a road, but making it completely mastered with incredible stone artwork. It's like, how'd they do that on the inside, but on the outside they never did anything like that? Like it's just more proof that these are ancient structures poking up out of the ground still. Disasters happened, laid down new dirt. That's what we see in like all the pictures and stuff. But at some time in the past, the same type of masterful floor work and groundwork that we see on the inside of these buildings also existed on the outside of these buildings. But more importantly, why I wanted to bring us back to this picture is because you can see that surrounding her is the sun shining. And the sun is another symbol of God. He is the light and life of the world. He's the sun, capital S-U-N and capital S-O-N. In the very end of the Old Testament, in the book of Malachi, it refers to God as the capital S-U-N of righteousness, because he's the light and life of the world, literally. And when you're inside and you stand exactly under the dome and look straight up at the dome, this is what you see right here. They got this little chandelier hanging down, and they say that this stonework right here of this dome has this blue tinge to it to represent the sky. And then if you look directly under that chandelier, if you move to the side so you can see it better, there's the sun right there as the dead center of this blue dome, the blue dome being the firmament and the sun being God's light, shining down through the firmament, giving light and life to the world. There's also this image inside of the building. I didn't get a picture of this one, but same thing right here. This is just on the top of a ceiling again, 100% masterful stonework right here. And once again, the sun is shining as the dead center of it, with a bunch of ancient symbolism around it. Like right here, you've got the stone woman again depicted right there. But then you've got all these little ancient symbols right here, Egyptian type symbols. And then you've got this huge, beautiful door right here with these ancient people depicted, and the ancient eagle, the ancient Egyptian eagle depicted right there in the center. You've got the sun shining right here in the top left corner. And then you've got corn directly behind the eagle, all symbolism of the promised land. And they say that each one of these doors weighs 750 pounds, very heavy doors. And this is where I wanted to bring up the Book of Mormon and talk about the Native Americans, the people native to these lands, because that's who's depicted right here. But it's not Native American Indians as we've been taught. It's the seed of Joseph, the Nephites and Lamanites that escaped out of Jerusalem, the seed of Joseph that God brought back to these lands. That's the people that's being depicted right here. And then if I pan this away and I show you on top of the room right here, on top of the ceiling, we see that there's ancient people depicted right here in robes. Once again, just showing this is all ancient civilization artwork with the sun, God, as the dead center of it. Another depiction up in the stone ceiling where you see the sun as the dead center, and then you see ancient symbols surrounding it, and then ancient people surrounding all of those symbols. And this is where I'll say this is the Nephites and the Lamanites again being depicted right here. Specifically the Nephites depicted right here, doing industry, working agriculture, sowing the land. But if you pay attention, there's also the scales of equity and justice right here, and all these other ancient Egyptian symbols. And I say that they even admit that this is the case, that this is an ancient temple, and I'll show you that right here. So coming back to this picture, which I already showed you, of a piece of the ceiling inside the Capitol building. It's got the sun as the center of it. It's got the stone woman on the exterior of it with a bunch of other ancient symbols. It says the sun is the center, and then it says you have the seasons and the first fruits of the soil being gathered up by ancient people to take to the temple to show their thankfulness. First fruits are things like fruits and flowers and hay and grain and livestock, animal sacrifice. In the corners of the dome, you see agriculture, plowing, sowing, cultivating, and reaping. Sowing, husbandry. So it's saying right here that this, with God, the sun, the light and life of the world as the center, there's ancient people around it practicing husbandry, sowing, and animal sacrifice, and they're carrying their first fruits to the temple. Then if we come right here, it says that the memorial chamber, this piece up on top right here, and I actually got up inside of there, I'll show you in just a second, but that piece was designed to look like a temple on top of the Capitol, because this whole thing is an ancient temple. And right here, when we read about Solomon, what they say about his statue on the exterior of the building, it says King Solomon built many temples during his time as a leader. These temples were the centers for Hebrew religious activities, just as the state capitol is the center of our state's governmental activities. Really, that's the comparison. Ancient Hebrew temples, we're comparing those to United States governmental activities. Ancient sacrifice, first fruits being sacrificed, gathered up by ancient people, taken to the temple. Let's compare all of that to United States, Nebraska governmental activities? Or is what's actually going on here is this is an ancient temple, and you guys are telling us stupid stories that this is all United States stuff, when it clearly has nothing to do with the United States and has everything to do with ancient Egyptian, Israelite, and Nephite civilizations. Now here's a video I took up in the temple memorial chamber, as they called it, designed to look like an ancient temple. This is as high up in the tower as they let the public go. Definitely worth it to go out of your way to get up into this tower. It's very, very cool. The whole building, like, you could spend tons of time on the outside of it, tons of time on the inside of it, and then definitely get up into the tower and have a look. It's really, really amazing and extremely mind-blowingly excessive, and makes no sense for a 1920s government building. But that's the story they tell us. But what do you think? Sound off in the comments. Do you think this is truly a building that was built for government in 1920, or does it seem to be an ancient leftover temple that's been repurposed into a government building?